I go off mute, I could say again, Olga, glad to see you.
Hey, hi Harry, how are you?
Doing well. Doing well.
I'm sorry I
I,
couldn't make it last week. It's like,
that's okay.
so how are
Glad to
you?
have you here.
Yes, just in case somebody needs something, I can just help out.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. How about yourself? How's Chicago over there?
Chicago's nice and cool here. Yeah, it's in the
That's not.
40s.
Oh yeah, same thing here down in the south, which is kind of surprising.
Yeah,
We usually have like 60, but today was like in the 40s. Like, oh my God.
yeah, yeah. Well,
We are not used to that.
I know, I know. Yeah, but, yeah,
Yeah.
I had to have my furnace replaced this summer,
Oh.
and when I went to turn it on,
Mm-hmm.
no heat.
Oh, kidding
Brand
me.
new one. No, I'm not kidding you. They're coming
So,
tomorrow to fix it.
okay, but when they install it, they didn't test it?
They did, and it worked.
Oh.
And between then and now, when I didn't use it for the
Ah.
heat at all,
Yeah.
it broke.
I mean, you have
So
it. I mean, if it's a new one, so you still have warranty on it, right?
right, right.
Because those pieces are not they're not cheap.
No, not at all.
I, I replaced mine 2 years ago, man. Oh God, it's like
Yeah,
I don't know, but
it's a
they come. I
major.
think they come with like a 10 years or 5 years warranty, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's a pretty good warranty.
Yep.
So yeah, just having to deal with the space heater and hey,
So how
sounds
did you
good.
cope? You put like firewood.
No, no.
What?
I guess I could have put the fireplace on. Nah, too much work to get to it. No,
Oh yeah.
just a flannel shirt and you know,
Good.
some chattering teeth. It's no big deal.
Uh, Glad to
So
meet the new people, the new cohort, right?
yep,
Ty, Essential, Alma, and Jeff.
yep. Yeah, we got a bunch more coming too.
Oh, okay. How many
And
people we have this time around?
That's a good question. I
nice to
didn't
meet you all.
count.
Oh, okay.
How many?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think about. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm going to leave it up to you, although you can count them today.
Okay, okay.
In the Teams chat, you guys have it as 39 people.
Oh yeah.
39 for
Oh,
agile call. Usually it's a small group.
yeah,
39, that would be surprising. Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, it
I
seems
just
I,
like
I
the
just see
number of
30.
the number of participants in each class have been around like 15. Seems
Yeah,
like.
okay, let me check.
there were like 34 who were authorized.
Wow.
That
Yeah.
might be right. 34. Sorry, I might be off then. My bad.
Well, anything above 5 is intimidating.
So we don't have the Scrum music, the agile music today?
We started at the top of the hour.
Oh, okay, okay. I thought
Give me
it
a
would have been like a
break.
warm up, right?
It is. We don't start until 7 minutes after. So,
Oh, okay.
and I got a limited number of these things, so we ration them out a little bit. So we'll start that in just a few minutes here. But people do tend to show up for the music.
I think so. I'm in.
Yep, you're in.
Okay.
Having a stand-up discussing our new day with clients and users, it's always the best way. Being productive, we're all in one team. Being agile is our favorite thing. Caring and sharing to increase our knowledge. Feedback and test first, that is the team's pledge. Stories and stand-ups, we don't miss a thing. Being agile is our favorite thing. Working away with our laptops and mouses. People with brains as big as their houses. Software that flies like it has wings. Being agile is our favorite thing. When the client rings, wants to change things, then we don't get mad. We simply remember our favorite things, and then we start feeling glad.
I don't know if we heard this one before.
Somebody once told me my team is moving slowly, and a project turned from yellow to red. I was looking for some fun, a new way to get it done, and who Scrum may help us get ahead. Well, the sprints start coming and they don't stop coming. Read the Scrum Guide rules and we hit the ground running. Did it make sense before we started Scrum? We worked real hard but never were done. So much to do, so much to see, so we start inspect and adapting. We focus on optimizing flow. We gotta keep WIP limits low. Hey now, you're a Scrum star, get your Scrum on each day. Hey now, you're a Scrum star, get your sprint on, iterate. With all this transparency, we found using Scrum brings agility. It's a framework and it's really quite clever. Reflect each sprint and keep getting better, and the value that we deliver reveals new things for us to consider. The work complete, it's just a small piece. The customer's waiting, so we gotta release. Our team delivers so much more. We're better with Scrum now than ever before. Hey now, you're a Scrum star, get your Scrum on each day. Hey now, you're a Scrum star, get your sprint on, iterate. With all this transparency, we found using Scrum brings agility. Somebody once asked, could you help me with my task? I need to change the way that I am working. I said, yep, what a concept. Let's find the skills we need and prep, and we'll form a cross-functional team. Well, the sprints start coming and they don't stop coming. Read the Scrum Guide rules and we hit the ground running. Did it make sense before we started Scrum? We worked real hard but never were done. So much to do, so much to see, so we start inspect and adapting. focus on optimizing flow. We gotta keep quick limits low. Hey now, you're a Scrum star, get your Scrum on each day. Hey now, you're a Scrum star, get your sprint on, iterate. With all this transparency, you found using Scrum brings agility. With all this transparency, you found using Scrum brings agility.
Okay, we still have a couple of minutes here, so I'm going to. Should we do another one? No?
Sure, why not?
Sure, yeah.
What do I have here? Scrum Star. I think we did this one before, but it's a good one.
Courage, focus, commitment, respect, openness, Scrum values help us reflect. Definition of done has an impediment. We need more testing environments. Testing, testing, testing environments. Here we are now, doing Scrum now. We were fragile, now we're agile. Scrum is simple and contagious. Getting started, it's gonna change us. My PBIs were sliced so thin, I'm done before I even begin. My team's so cross-functional, we swarm on one single piece flow, single piece flow. Here we are now, doing Scrum now. We were fragile, now we're agile. Scrum is simple and contagious. Getting started, it's gonna change us. Yeah. And I forget just why we sprint. Oh yeah, that's right, the increment. 2001, the manifesto was born. We're all still trying to transform, 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 transform. Here we are now, doing Scrum now. We were fragile, now we're agile. Scrum is simple and contagious. Getting started, it's gonna change us. Transformation, an adoption, anti-fragile. Pick an option, keep improving, keep improving, keep improving, keep improving, keep improving.
All right. Let's move on to today's topic. Oh, come on. We're on 2 today. All right. We'll just do this. All right. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
At least you're not saying yes, ma'am. All right. If you could mute your phone, that would be very much appreciated. And today we're going to be talking about a few things. Yeah. Talk about assessing value, prioritizing value, delivering incrementally, agile contracting, and testing. Yeah. So moving on to the first. So what's value driven delivery? We're going to talk about here is a comparison and contrast between agile development and traditional or predictive development. As far as visibility, adaptability, business value, and risk, here's how it stacks up. With traditional development, visibility is high at the start of a project. You've got everybody's attention. Everybody is trying to get resources committed to the effort, to the project itself. You have a kickoff meeting, get everybody involved with that, and then the work starts with requirements and then design, implementation, and testing. So once the requirements start, really the visibility goes way down because you've got a limited number of people working on it. They're isolated, and the visibility doesn't really pick back up until you're in the testing phase where things may or may not be on track. And if they're not on track, you're going to get a lot more visibility than you want. And when you're going into final testing or you're going into user acceptance testing, things like that, everybody's looking at you because that's what the project's hinging on, whether or not you can get through the testing phase. With an agile effort, the visibility is going to be consistent throughout because you're going to have big information radiators, things like Kanbans or program boards. Um, the tools that you use are usually able to produce reports on velocity, on do burn down charts, everything like that, so that whoever needs to take a look at it can see it at all times. There's nothing that's hidden. Okay. As far as being able to adapt to changes with traditional development, before things really get locked down, contract negotiations and then requirements and design, it's pretty easy to change. But once that occurs, once you're locked down on the scope of the project, then everything is controlled so that it becomes harder and harder and harder to change anything because you've got the entire legacy that you're dragging with you as you develop, as you do any changes. You've got to make sure that any changes don't affect all the work that you've done beforehand. Okay? And when you're finally into testing, heaven help you if you've got to make a change to something that's fundamental because you've got to rerun all your tests. You got to make sure that it doesn't affect everything in the delivery and anything at all like that. With an agile effort, you're able to adjust and adapt on every time box that you have because every time box, like every increment, every iteration, what you're going to be doing is reevaluating your backlog, prioritizing things, and working on the highest priority items. And if that's a change that's required by the customer and it's a high priority, then you work on that so that you're able to change what your deliveries are all the way through until you're basically until you're uh, your product is end of life. Okay, then you have the trade-offs between whether it's economically viable to do it and how necessary it is to the customer. So you're going to have higher adaptability. As far as business value, I mean, we've talked about this before, where with a traditional development, value is delivered once the entire big glob is given to the customer. Okay. So that there is absolutely no value that is delivered until that time. With an agile effort, you're going to be incrementally delivering value. You'll have your minimum viable product to begin with, and that's the product that is just enough functionality for the customer to be able to use it and to the producing company being able to receive some revenue for it. And we just keep adding on to that throughout the entire life of the product so that we're able, with the adaptability of an agile effort, we're able to actually deliver more value to the customer because we're evaluating, actually the customer's evaluating the deliveries all along the way and giving us information about how the deliveries could be modified to better suit their needs at that particular time. Because remember, with a traditional development, we start out, with locking down the scope of the project. So what we're doing is we're trying to predict exactly what that product should look like at some time in the future, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, however long it takes for this project to deliver its value. Okay. But that value is going to be realized only at the end of the project. Risk has a different curve here. With traditional development and with agile development, your risk starts out high because you're identifying things that could happen, things that could go wrong. And over time, what you're doing with an agile effort is you're getting feedback from your customer. You're reassessing the market, you're reassessing suppliers, things like that, so that you're able to mitigate your risk all along the way. With traditional development, the risk is alive longer because you're not getting that feedback. You're also really mitigating your risks closer to the end of the life cycle for this project. Okay. So you can see there's a gap on each of these between an agile development and traditional development. Any questions on those? Okay. So what we want to be able to do is deliver early, deliver often, and minimize the waste that occurs. Okay. This is a lean principle, and you'll probably need to know this for the test. Some examples of waste: any work that's only partially done. Okay. If it isn't deliverable, it's a waste of time and effort to produce it. Extra process just for process's sake. If there are steps that can be eliminated, Lean says eliminate them. They're waste. Extra features that the development team or even the product owner may think that the customer could use. That's waste because the customer hasn't asked for it, and we haven't assessed whether or not the customer can actually use it. So any extra features that aren't that don't add to the value being delivered to the customer is defined as waste. If we don't have people dedicated to an effort and they have to switch tasks, You know, if they're, say a Scrum Master is trying to handle 2 Scrum teams or 3 Scrum teams at the same time, you know, that context switching or task switching is really a waste of time because you're not 100% focused on what you're delivering. Any delays or any waiting in between steps in your process, that is definitely waste, and need to take a look at those for ways that you can eliminate the waiting periods. Any honestly, I don't know what they meant by motion here. I've got to take a look at this slide. But defects, any defects are a waste. So that if you introduce a defect, you're wasting time, you're wasting energy, and you're wasting money in correcting those defects. The best thing to do is not put any defects in there. That's where some techniques such as test-driven development can really add or actually eliminate the introduction of defects. Okay. So let's talk about assessing value. There are a bunch of formulas we're going to take a look at tonight here. You most likely will not have to solve any equations. You just need to know what's good, what's bad. Okay, so return on investment. Okay, defined as the benefits received divided by the money invested. So that if we make $600,000 after on an investment of $300,000, then our return on investment is just basically 600,000 divided by the 300,000. So our return on investment is 200%. Okay. Whenever you have a comparison that you need to make, if you have 2 returns on investments given, the higher one is good, the lower one is not so good. If you've got a negative, if say you only realize $200,000 on a $300,000 investment, okay, your ROI is less than 1%. That is bad. The closer you get to 0 is bad. Okay. And if you lose money and it's negative, it's definitely bad. But just realize which is good, which is bad. Okay. Something that you're going to run up against multiple times is going to be net present value. Okay. When we took a look at return on investment, we have an investment that may be over a long period of time, say years, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Okay. With inflation, the value of the money in the future is not going to be as great as the value of money today. So if we have 8%.
Oh man, come, let's go.
Okay, where are we going? So that we want to be able to maximize the net present value. Okay, that is good. A positive number is good. So in our example here, and just realize that net present value is equal to the cash flow divided by the sum of the 1 plus the rate of return raised to the number of intervals that you're applying that rate of return. Okay. So if we make $100,000 a year over 3 years, and the discount rate, what inflation is, or your interest rate is 6%, our net present value looks like this. The $300,000 is the $100,000 a year for the 3 years. So that's $300,000. 1 is fixed. The 0.06 is our interest rate or our inflation rate. And since it's over a period of 3 years, and this interest rate or inflation rate is expressed as 6% per year, then you raise it to the third power. Okay, when you divide it up, when you do 1.06 to the third power and divide that into $300,000, you find out that at the end of 3 years, your $300,000 that you would receive by the end of the 3 years would be worth $251,885 today, the day that you're calculating it. Okay. Know that a positive number is good. The higher the positive number is better. That's all you need to know about this. I doubt very much if they're going to ask you to calculate net present value. Okay. Any questions about this or return on investment before we get into the really hairy stuff? Okay. Something called internal rate of return. That is really what it costs us to be in business. Okay. So internal rate of return is defined as the discount rate at which the project revenue, what we're getting from outside, is equal to our costs. Okay. So if we're not making any money, okay, our internal rate of return, okay, these would be equal, and internal rate of return would be 0. Okay. Just know that the project with the highest rate of return is the one that should be chosen if you're doing prioritization. Okay. Don't worry about the formula. Internal rate of return equals net present value equals summation from 1 to whatever of your costs and your internal rate of return, and your rate of return raised to that power, T power. Okay, just know this stuff. If you've got one choice that says the internal rate of return is 6%, another one says the internal rate of return is 5%, another one says 4%, another one says 3%, and they ask which is the worst rate of return, which one would it be?
5, yeah?
Nope, would be the 3%.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear 3. I saw 6 and 5.
Oh, yeah,
Apologies.
6 and 5's on here, but yeah, if you're going to have 4 choices.
Gotcha.
Okay, so if you had 6, 5, 4, and 3, the worst
The
one would be
lowest.
3. Yep, exactly. That's what you need to know. What would be best? What would be worst? Okay. So to summarize everything, you've got return on investment, net present value, internal rate of return. Okay. The bigger the return on investment, the better it is. Positive numbers are good for net present value. If you're comparing projects, the higher or the highest one is the best one. Internal rate of return, the highest discount rate is the best project with the best payback. Okay, so if you have an internal rate of return of 6.543%, you want to go with the project that gives you the 6% payback. Okay. Now, PMI has been known to try and trick you on the test. Okay, so they may ask you how, project A's return on investment compares to project B's net present value. You can't compare them. Okay, realize that. there will be a possible response that says that you can't compare them. Know that you can't between two projects. Okay. But other than that, they're pretty nice people. Okay. Earned value and earned value management. Okay. What earned value is how much your project has, in quotes, earned over the period of time that you're looking at it. So that if your costs are in line, if they're exactly what you budgeted, and your schedule, you're on schedule, exactly on schedule, then you will have no variance. Your earned value will be equal to your planned value. Okay. Formulas that you need to remember. Cost variance is expressed two ways. One is the cost variance equals the earned value minus the actual cost, or you can see it expressed as cost variance is equal to planned cost minus actual cost. It depends on what's shown on your graph. Okay, we have planned cost here and actual cost. So your cost variance is going to be the difference between these two. Now, here you've got a positive difference between your actual cost and your planned cost. Okay, this is bad. Okay, if your actual cost exceeds your planned cost or exceeds your earned value, it is bad. Okay? Same thing for schedule variance. If you have a planned schedule, and in this case, your schedule is behind, that's bad. If your schedule is ahead of what you had planned, then that's good. Okay. So you just need to know those relationships in this case. Okay. Whoever just joined, if you could go on mute, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Any questions on these formulas? Okay.
Harry, it's not so much about the formula. I thought in this agile framework, like the invert triangle, that cost and schedule is not that it's not important, but it can vary, right?
Yep. It can vary. These are traditional values here. It's a traditional way of measuring a project's, you know, how well a project is doing. In an agile effort, yeah, you're absolutely right, Mohammed. Not so much. You don't, your cost variance is, you're not going to calculate it because your cost is fixed. Okay, so your variance is 0. Your schedule variance is going to be 0 again because you're producing something every 2 weeks or every iteration. Yes, I know. I keep telling you 2 weeks.
But in the waterfall
Inside
model,
and
like the
outside of
iron
this.
triangle, of course, these are very, very important. But in agile,
Yep.
it's not so much. But it's still a good exam question, I guess, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes. These are what you may see on the exam. That's the only reason we're going over them.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So with Agile, we want to be able to assign a business value to each of the features that we're going to be working on, or each of the stories that we're going to be working on, or each piece that we're going to be working on. Okay, and what we want to be able to do is deliver the most value in the shortest period of time. With SAFE, for example, we have a prioritization scheme called WSJF, weighted shortest job first. Okay. What we want is the highest value that is able to be delivered in the shortest period of time. Okay, so the two will balance each other out. Okay. So what you want to be able to do is work on your most valuable effort first. If it's the longest, it's going to take the most effort, then so be it. Okay. If, however, some of the ones that may be slightly less value, but can be done extremely fast, that may be something that you want to prioritize. But for the test, remember, go with the one that produces the most value for yourself. Okay. Concept you need to remember is the point of diminishing returns. That's the time when you're not receiving enough revenue for the effort that you're expending to produce the features or the functionality. Okay. That needs to be assessed by the business continuously to make sure that we are making enough return on the investment that we're putting into creating new value here. Okay. So in an agile effort, this is assessed all along the way to make sure that we're making enough margin to continue producing the value for that customer or group of customers. Now, when it gets to a point that is less than, say, our internal rate of return, what we want to be able to do is shut off development to that effort, to that product or product line. Another concept is build only what is needed. Okay. We've talked about this before when I used the Excel example with the number of features that are delivered with Excel and how many the average person really uses. Sometimes I'm lucky to use a dozen features of Excel. In studies, it's been shown that 70% of the code written in traditional projects is rarely, if ever, used in production. Now, those features aren't needed. Okay. We have what sometimes is called asking for the kitchen sink, where a customer, because we're negotiating everything up front, we're doing all the requirements, all the design, the contract will state exactly what's going to be in that project and what that deliverable is going to be. They put everything in there that they could even ever think of because they won't have a chance to modify that project without a huge cost later on once the requirements are done, once the contract's signed. Okay. So there really is no value to a lot of what has been delivered traditionally. One second here. All right. So what we want to be able to do, and this is a tenet of lean, build only what's needed. Don't build excess features in. Give the customer what they have asked for. They can always assess and then ask for more because we're going to keep delivering value until it isn't economically profitable for us. Okay, we're more than willing to take changes. So what we do is every increment, whether it's an iteration or a program increment, we reprioritize the work. We take a look at what needs to be done, prioritize it, and then juggle our backlog to accommodate that. So at each increment, as I said before, the business needs to ask, should we keep going with this product, or is it end of life? Do we stop here? If we use incremental delivery, and that's a product increment, an iteration, any one of those is an increment. Okay. Know that we reduce the risk by reducing how much expense is in play at any one time. If we have, if we have this entire effort, the whole project, we're working on the whole thing at any one time. We either have to stop the entire project or we keep going with it. Okay, maybe a reduction in scope. And then we have to pull out things and adjust things. But with an agile effort, what we're able to do is just keep building and building and building upon what we first delivered until the time that it isn't economically feasible anymore. Okay. Now, if the customer needs additional features and they're willing to pay, enough money for it, yeah, we can keep going. No problem with that. But we're able to pivot very, very rapidly when you think about the whole thing. So you can pivot within one increment, one iteration. So you've still delivered value up to that iteration, and you can stop something in the middle of everything. Okay. If the customer isn't willing to pay for it, if we no longer have a market for it, we stop working on it. We'll work on something else. More work will be brought to the people who are delivering the value.
Harry, can I ask a quick question there?
Yeah.
You mentioned that before also, to minimize the waste, just don't build extra features. As a team, we are product owner driven, right? So product owner tells us what's the priorities. So before the iteration starts, they prioritize. After every iteration, they reprioritize. But again, if they're telling us that we need this feature, so then we don't have much visibility or depth or insight of understanding should we build it or not. So we go if it is prioritized high, right?
If it's prioritized by the business, they're the ones who need to ask this question. Should we keep going or stop here? Okay. The business needs to work with the customers to determine whether, what the priority of the work is. If we've got 5 features that we need to deliver, what priority order should they be in? Should it be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 5, 4, 1? That's the business's responsibility. It's not up to the developers to determine what needs to be worked on. They can, pull off the backlog.
Right, now that makes sense. Yeah, we're not talking gold plating. We're just saying like whatever they told us to build, we did, and then in a few iteration after, it turns out that it was not needed. But that's not really as a team we can take the responsibility for, right? We were told to build, we did it. Yeah.
Yes, if you built exactly what you were told to build, exactly what the customer said that they wanted, that's great. I mean, if you built what the customer asked for and then you added a few things on there because they looked nifty, that is waste. Okay. The customer hadn't asked for it. Now, if you wanted to consider it, something like a spike where you're assessing something, where the customer can assess something, yeah, that's legitimate. If the and that again is the product owner's responsibility to create that spike or that story and prioritize it sufficiently high so that the development team creates that value that they can take back to the customer to assess.
Right, that makes sense. That's what I was saying. Like even if it makes sense to us, we go back to product owner and get it prioritized, get their buy-in, and then build.
Yep. What we're doing is we're going from a technology-driven development paradigm to a business-driven development paradigm, where it's the responsibility of the business to tell the development teams what to do, what to build, not how to build it, but what to build, because they're working directly with the customers.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. We've got a couple of concepts here. Notice these: must have, should have, could have. We're going to cover those in a minute or two here. But this MVP, and it's not most valuable player, it's minimum viable product. And this term is used kind of loosely in Agile circles. I mean, really, you have one minimum viable product. That is what you initially roll out. That is the minimum amount of functionality that the customer can use and will pay for. So that it's a win-win situation where the customer gets the value and they pay for it. So customer gets something that they can use and the producing team gets revenue for it. Okay. You will sometimes see minimum viable product used multiple times. Okay, where you have a product in the field. I've seen MVP used as what is the minimum that you need to produce to augment that product? Okay, what's the minimum viable add-on to it? Literally, minimum viable product is what's initially rolled out. You build upon it incrementally. You increase the functionality, you increase the value of the product over time. Okay. But remember that MVP is completed enough to be useful, but does not represent the entire product or project. Okay. You'll see project used throughout the test. Okay. PMI loves project. Okay. Where the industry is moving more from project to product that we're concerned about. Okay. Now, you'll also see KPIs, which are key performance indicators. Now, there are ones that you need to know for the exam. Know burn down, burn up, and churn. Okay, these are classics that are kept track of. Okay. I mean, we don't measure everything in Agile, but we measure a bunch of stuff. Okay, we measure what makes sense. Okay. If it makes sense that we measure the how quickly something can be developed, then we measure it. We take metrics on that and we use the metrics. It isn't just taking data to take data. We have to be taking data that results in decisions being made. Okay. So remember, the data-driven decision making is key in an Agile environment. Okay. So these are the typical ones for Agile teams. Burn down, showing how much work is left to do. With a burn down chart, you're going to see hopefully a steadily declining curve, because you have the total number of features that you're to be delivering. And this is very project oriented. Okay. And you burn that down to 0, which says that you delivered all the features for that particular project. Now, we know that there can be changes to that, so that a burn down chart may have some plateaus before it dips, or it may actually, increase at times because of changes that have been accepted. Okay. Burn up's just the opposite. Okay, you start at 0 and you burn up to the total number of features to be delivered. Okay. Churn shows how many times, what any new functionality was introduced, any new features introduced that the team has to develop, or how many times that features or functions were pulled out of the deliveries, okay, reprioritized. All right. Now risk is a whole nother ball game. I'm going to just go through this slide. So realize that value is what we get for our business from an agile project. It's also what is delivered to the customer. Okay. So the result of people's efforts in an agile uh, uh, project or an agile effort is value. Okay. You can think about risk as being anti-value. Okay. So a risk can take away value from our ultimate delivery. If there's a risk that a construction project, for example, will get, they'll have too many rain days to be able to complete the project in the contracted amount of time. Okay, that's a risk. With Agile, there could be a risk that a software tool will not be ready in the time frame that's needed by the development team. Or a risk may be that the development team may not be able to integrate a new database into the product. So risk takes away value. Okay. If you're a PMP, and I think we may have one or more in this workshop, risk for PMPs is defined as both positive and negative. Okay. But remember, but in an agile effort, the risk is purely negative. Okay, risk detracts from value. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. Now, agile teams may want to tackle high risk work sooner so that if they fail fast, and you're able to deal with the problems sooner. Now, this prioritization needs to be balanced with the value that can be delivered too. But, usually the high risk items are ones that would potentially have a high probability of reward or a higher reward. Okay. So by prioritizing it early, we're able to unearth the risks. We're able to deal with the risks earlier on and be able to deliver potentially a higher value. Okay. So just remember that risk has to be factored into the prioritization scheme that you use. Okay. So you've got to factor in both the potential value and the potential risk. Okay. Something else we have to be aware of, and it's much easier to deal with this in an agile effort because we can change so easily, is regulatory compliance. Okay. AT&T works in some heavily regulated areas, especially with landlines. Landlines are some of the most regulated um, uh, utilities on the planet. Okay, so these regulations change. Also on the mobility side, there are continual changes in regulations for individual communities as far as tower placement, the way things have to be graded, the way that they have to be landscaped, the whole 9 yards like that. Okay, there are times where if you have a product that some software products have to be SOX compliant, Sarbanes-Oxley compliant, which means that they have to meet certain requirements. These things can change, okay, so that what we want to be able to do is accommodate those changes in an agile effort, which is a lot easier than changing things during a predictive methods effort. Okay. One thing that you want to remember too is that Agile talks about working software is more valuable than comprehensive documentation. Now, there are some regulations that a certain amount of documentation has to be produced. This, working software doesn't trump that. If you have a regulation that you have to adhere to, you do it. Okay. If you have to produce a certain number of reports or a certain number of studies for an effort by regulation, then you have to do it. You can't get away with, saying we just delivered working software. Okay. Any questions on this so far? Okay. So what we want to be able to do is accommodate changes in priorities. So, for example, our old plan said that we were going to build A, then B, then C. These were the priorities. Okay. So we end up on a boundary, whether it is an increment, whether it's an iteration. The product owner or the equivalent assesses the priority. We're going with B and C here, right? Well, if a change is introduced, we need to assess where that change needs to be inserted. So in this example, the reprioritization would result in a new plan where B is the first thing worked on. The change is the second thing worked on because it's second value. And C would be worked on third because the value is not greater than the change and it's not greater than feature B. Okay, so this is done at every time box boundary. You assess what is the highest priority, what's the next highest priority, and all along from there. And so these changes can have a high enough priority to squeeze in between what were previously committed features. Okay. This just stresses that the product owner is the responsible person in Scrum for prioritizing the backlog. And it's prioritized by business value. So we're business-driven development. One of the keys to remember, and you won't have a question that says, does the product owner reprioritize continuously? No. Continuous reprioritization may be a possible answer for questions as to what, say, product owner responsibilities are, everything except, okay, realize that continuous reprioritization is a responsibility of the product owner. Those are the type of questions you're going to get, where you have to, understand where things fit, why they fit there, and be able to pick out the ones that don't fit. Okay. Remember we talked about Moscow before? Moscow is must have, should have, could have, would have. Okay, it is more than a city in Russia. Okay.
Can I add something, Ari?
Yeah,
For the
sure.
prioritization, I think it's a team effort, or even though it's the product owner, but some severity to prioritize the backlog. I think it's more like a team effort to prioritize, right?
Well, yeah, it's the responsibility of the product owner to prioritize. Now, the product owner may call in other people to help make
Mm-hmm.
those decisions and ask, for example, ask the development team, what kind of effort it is to produce this particular feature.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second here. Okay. Sorry, thought the dog had something again. So even if you're using any one of these prioritization schemes, the product owner takes the lead on that.
Okay.
And if he or she needs the development team's input, if they need an architect's input, if they need input from the product manager or the customer directly, they're the ones responsible for getting that and using that information in the prioritization.
Good.
Okay. Now, these are all different ways of prioritizing, and we'll cover them too. Here's WSJIF, the one I was talking about previously, the weighted shortest job first. Okay, so let's dive into these. Yeah, and with everything, priority is going to be the ones with the most value, a little bit lesser value, least value, and if there's no value to it, we don't do it. Now, the least value items may never get done either, depending on how many high value and medium value deliverables they are. Okay, so don't think that everything gets done except no value. No, remember we assess whether or not it's financially viable for us to produce value at every one of these time boxes. Okay, so these least value, maybe some of the less value, and maybe even some of the most valuable features may not get produced for a product if we can't get a big enough return on our investment to warrant it. Okay, so monopoly money is basically it. You give everybody involved in the prioritization uh, a certain amount of monopoly money. They can put all their money on one feature. They can split it up between features, and the prioritization results from which ones have the most money on them. Okay. Point distribution or dot voting, you get 100 points or 50 points or 10 points. You know, and either points or same number of dots, and you do the same thing. You assign your values to each of the items being prioritized, and it's basically the same thing. It's a uh, popularity vote here. That's what you're getting, and you can restrict it to 20% of the number of items to vote on. You know, all this. Uh, yeah. Really, the number of points that you have to allocate or the number of dots that you get is arbitrary. You can have it as long as each person has the same number. Okay. Something called Kano analysis. This is the only time that I've seen it, only time I've seen it used, and it is a determination whether or not it meets customers' needs and delights the customer. Okay. Uh, it's really trying to predict the customer's reaction to new features. Um, and you can use it to help prioritize them. Um, like I said, I've never seen this. You may have a question about this on the test. It's covered very adequately in the book. So read it and understand what the values are here. What you want to do is you really want to be in the upper right quadrant where you're at least satisfying, if not delighting the customer. Okay. So you want high on the satisfaction scale and high on the need fulfilled scale. It's okay to be here down in the satisfiers, but it's best to be up in the up in this eighth here, this slice right here. Okay. There are other methods of prioritizing things, whether they're features, whether they're stories, whether they're, I mean, even epics. Okay. And you can score them 1 to 9, knowing that you can only have 1 1. Okay. The you take into consideration all the things they're really valuable and useful for that particular organization. Things like cost benefit ratio, any penalties that could be assessed if that feature is not developed. You know, if the risk is super high, that it may be a high priority, maybe a low priority. Okay, so that you look at it from that perspective. Now, with weighted shortest job first, you do use a modified Fibonacci sequence, and it's modified because it starts at 1. And with Fibonacci sequences, you add the next entry is the sum of the previous 2 entries. So in this case, 3 is the sum of 1 and 2. 5 is the sum of 3 and 2. 8 is the sum of 5 and 3, and it just keeps going to infinity. Okay. You need to determine the business value of, it's actually the cost of delay. And we also take into consideration the job size. That's where it comes up to weighted shortest job first. What we want to be able to do is work on the jobs that have the highest value, okay, the highest cost of delay, and are small. Okay, that you want that ratio to be the lowest. You want to work on the lowest ratio one to start with. Okay, highest ratio, excuse me. It's the highest ratio. So there's a large cost of delay and the job size is small, say a 1, okay, it's going to be higher than if the job size is, say, 21. Okay. So the higher the number in for WSJF, the higher priority it is. Something that we use in the industry, and it's probably not going to be on the exam. Now, this is another illustration of relative prioritization. Okay, things, and since, as I said, PMI is very project oriented, you may see something around here, with terms like cutoff to meet budget or time box. Okay, I'll buy time box, budget maybe somewhat, but say, for example, your minimum viable product starts out to be A, B, and C. D and E is going to be worked during the same iteration or increment, and feature F is not going to be able to be worked because of constraints. Now, during, before everything is started, customer wants a change or needs a change, and that change has to be incorporated in the MVP. Well, your plan needs to change so that if you've got an addition here, something has to fall off. And ideally, it's the lowest priority item. You can't expect people to just accept new work. Okay. So in this case, the MVP then would consist of A, B, C, and the delta feature. Okay. In this order. Then when you're done with that, you pull D off the backlog to work on. But E isn't prioritized at this point. So the next time around, you may need to assess E and F, whether or not they should be included in the product. And that'll depend on the customer feedback. That'll depend on whether or not the technology is available or the expertise is available to deliver the value, received from these efforts, E and F. Okay, just remember that you're constantly reprioritizing, you're constantly taking a look at the value of each of these features. Okay. Any questions on these? Okay. Let's deliver incrementally. Okay. This is a rehash of what we've been talking about. We want to be able to deliver value as soon as we can, something that the customer can use and something that we can receive revenue from, or set up to receive revenue in a very short period of time. Okay. And we want to be able to build upon that in an incremental fashion. So we keep that original minimum viable product out in the field and we add features to it. We continue to do that. And that's along the lines of any of the apps on your smartphone. They're when they're first in the App Store, the Playpen or whatever it is for Android, you've got your basic functionality. It's something that you can use. And if you notice that over time, you may get an update a day or maybe even more frequently, sometimes less frequently. Those are the incremental additions to the value of that particular app. That's what we want to, that's the type of delivery that we want to move to. So how we want to transform to being able to deliver that minimum viable product and then building upon it so that we realize the value as soon as we can. Okay. You may see this on the test. Know that they're pushing that high touch, low tech tools are preferred over high tech. Now, the material and the tests were constructed prior to COVID, prior to a lot of the advances that have been made in the tooling. So if it's on the test, go with what's in the book, go with this. High touch, low tech tools preferred over high tech. These days, with some of the Kanban boards that we were able to produce, some of the graphs that are able to be produced from the tools, you're almost approaching the scribbles, the additions to a card that you can have with just sticky notes and a board and things like that. Okay, and the thing is that, yeah, there's a barrier with complex software tools. A lot of the software tools are becoming much more easy to use. They're so much easier to use, it isn't funny. Okay, you can set up actually create dashboards using things like Power BI that can give the equivalent of these handwritten things. Okay. So for the test, go with this. In reality, realize that some of the tools that we have these days can be effectively used. Okay. Another way to have a radiator is to have a Kanban board. Okay. In this one here, we've got a very, very simple one. We have a list of items that we need to do. We have a list of items that we're doing, and we have a list of items that are done. Okay. You will see in some subsequent slides here that there can be limits imposed on any of these lanes. Okay. To keep the total number of items that you're working on to a manageable level for that particular team. We want a high flow from to do through done, as high a flow as possible. So we want small batches to be moving through there. We don't want to have people changing context when they're working on what they need to deliver to the done column or whatever the column is to their right. Okay. And we want to eliminate things like bottlenecks. Right. Remember I said that we can have limits on work in process, and you'll see it both ways, work in process and work in progress. In this Kanban, we just have the three states: to do, in progress, and done. In this case, there's a WIP limit imposed on in progress of 2 items, which means that you can't bring anything else in from the to-do list to the in progress unless you move one of these to done. Okay, until you complete one of these, you can't bring any new work in. It's to keep the teams focused. It's to keep the flow higher. Now, you'll also see if you've got subdivisions within your Kanban board, if you've got columns in between these lines. So that in progress is composed of working and ready. Okay. If and so if there's a WIP limit of 2 in working and 2 in ready, in that case you could move both of these to ready whenever they're done. There is no WIP limit on whenever they're ready to be validated. Okay. Your done column here has validate and done as your 2 columns. Okay. There's no limit on this, so that everything A, B, C, D, E, X, Y, and Z can be in the validate column at the same time. All of them can be in the done column also. Okay. Okay. So we're going to walk through this Kanban. So X, Y, and Z are pulled in to final review to be validated, and somebody has to pull these in. We don't push, we don't assign. It's whoever is doing the validation, and it could be someone who was developing code 20 minutes before this, can pull in however many items in the ready column that they can. Okay, they can pull in 2 at a time here. And the validation, since there's no WIP limit, you can have everything here. All right. So we're going to follow a task through there. Let's do task C. So at this point, C's ready. Somebody can be working on it whenever they're able to. Okay. Since we have a WIP limit of 2 in working, and we've got 2 tasks in working here, or 2 cards, we can't pull C in until at least one of these moves to the right, at least one column. Okay. In this case, A has moved from working to ready. And notice that we still have the WIP limits of 2 and 2 here. If we just had a WIP limit of 2 in progress, you couldn't pull this card in. Okay? Because working would be erased, ready would be erased. If you have one overall here, that has precedence. So if that was 2, C would still have to wait until something was moved out into validate. Okay. So C is pulled, is now developed and ready for validation. So it's moved over to the ready under in progress. So at that point, somebody who's doing validation can pull C in to be worked on. Okay. And then you can pull another item into working. And have 2 that are being worked on, 2 that are ready. So these 2 here, since there's no WIP limit here, can be pulled across to be validated. These 2 have to wait until one or both of these get moved off. Okay. Is this making sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So then C just moves over and we pull the next piece of work in because we moved B and D over to here. Okay. And remember, with a Kanban, it is pull. Okay. Work is pulled by people who are going to be doing that work. So somebody who would be working here would pull from the ready column here. Okay. Somebody who is working on the readiness of these features would pull E or Z into here whenever there was a vacancy. Okay. And the validation team would pull over to validate once they're ready to pull it. Okay. They're not assigned, B or D or both. They pull it whenever it makes sense to. Okay. Remember we talked about Little's Law on Thursday of last week? This is a pretty good illustration that I think this is in China, where if you have full occupancy, you get nowhere. Okay, so that the more items that you have in process slows down the entire flow through that whatever entities add to the value. Okay. So if you keep your WIP limit, the number of items that you have in process, low, okay, if you have fewer items in process, it means that those items are processed more quickly. Okay, if you've only got one thing to concentrate on, it's easier to get that done than it is to have 5 things to concentrate on and try to get those 5 things done as best as you can. Remember this, and it won't be about a road. It may be about just a step in the process, that the empty road is more productive than the jammed road. Okay, so this road is more productive than this one because traffic's not moving. The road, its purpose is to allow people to move from one point to another point. Works great here, but this is definitely not the way to go. Okay. What we want to be able to do too is prevent what are called bottlenecks. That's where a process or a flow gets stuck, basically, because there are too many items arriving in comparison to the processing rate. Okay, so that you're stacking up a queue. Right. Cumulative flow diagrams are a way of looking at this. Okay, and these are just stacks of, in this case, the total number of things in each of these states. Okay, user testing, code and unit test, database work, analysis. Okay, and you can determine from this what's holding things up. Okay, if you notice that the database work is totally steady, so that it looks like analysis can't be, they can't do more analysis until this database work gets done. Okay. I've got a supplement. We're going to be covering cumulative flow diagrams in a later session, and we'll do some additional work besides the slides as to what CFDs are like and how to read them. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about contracting and not agile contracting. Okay, this should look familiar to you by now, where with the traditional effort, you're going to have fixed scope with cost and schedule being the variables, and the project manager who is doing his or her darndest to keep the cost contained and the schedule on time. Okay. To sum it up, a change in scope is really indicates failure by the project manager. With an agile effort, the scope is what is variable, because we have fixed cost and we have a fixed schedule. The cost being the funding for the agile team for an extended period of time, as we talked about before. Cost-based budgeting. And the schedule's fixed because we're delivering every iteration, we're delivering every increment. Okay. So delivery is set at time-boxed iterations, and the cost of the teams is known and it's funded. And scope is the one thing that is changed. If you can't get everything done in an iteration, it needs to be reprioritized. And if it's still high priority, worked in the next iteration, or perhaps even abandoned if it is no longer viable. Okay. So remember that in an agile effort, you're going to have contracts that are more outlines than specification of everything that has to be delivered. Okay. The contracts will recognize that there can be changes in priority, changes in functionality that can be introduced during the normal course of business with the product. Okay. Definitely not the same as a traditional project. Okay. Several different types of contracts that you may see with an agile effort. Something called a graduated fixed price contract, where the hourly rate actually goes down as your delivery gets from early to on time delayed. So that the party that's producing the value gets paid more per hour for delivering early than they do for delivering late by a big degree. Also see fixed price work packages where the consumer pays a fixed price for functionality, and if the receiving party. Okay. If the producing party is doing it in increments or even as a waterfall or a traditional type project, you know, where you may have some points along the project where payments are made as long as certain certain criteria are met. In a natural effort, it's very easy to have a fixed price work package where you pay for a certain, in effect, a certain number of people for an extended period of time for the life of the contract. Now, what you get for that may vary. Okay. And payments, as I've been alluding to with like minimum viable product, things like that. Payments are made as packages of work are delivered, and we do that in increments. A money for nothing contract, okay? Where if you decide that that there's no value going forward from that particular project, that it can be terminated. And it's usually a fixed price contract or, you know, cost plus contract where, you know, that the overall contract is paid off, even if there's no work done past the point of no returns. Changes for free. That's more along the lines of an agile project or an agile effort, where if you change scope, if you change prioritizations, there's no charge for that because it's part of the development methods that we use. Okay. All right. How do we go about verifying and validating value? Remember this diagram from Thursday? Feedback loops. This is XP model.
Yes.
So that all of these are feedback paths that are used within XP. And so what you want to be able to do, I mean, ideally, feedback you get from coding should be the place where defects are identified and any changes are proposed. Okay. And what we want to be able to do, remember the concept of failing fast. So you want to be able to, if you're going to fail, you want it to be upfront to where it costs less to remediate that problem, that failure. And you want to be able to learn from that so that if something doesn't work, you know, if it fails, that you're able to take advantage of that and determine the root cause of the failure and you know, have an effort to mitigate that failure. And it's really, all of this is about problem containment. You want to keep it as close to the South Pole as possible. It's cheapest to fix it here, and it just gets incremental. I don't know whether it's just you know, arithmetic or whether it's logarithmic or exponentially more costly to do things as you get a bigger and bigger product or a bigger and bigger delivery. A couple of types of testing you may be tested on: usability testing and exploratory testing. Okay. Usability testing is based on doing testing from the customer's perspective. Okay. Trying to use a database the way the customer would use it. Building a report the way the customer would need to do it. Okay. Exploratory testing is different. With exploratory testing, what you're looking to do is to break the thing by going along normal lines and testing along normal lines and also doing things like corner cases or just going off the testing script. Okay, just to try and discover some issues with the deliverable. Okay. We have continuous integration. This is part of DevSecOps. What you want to be able to do is have a source code control system where when anything is checked in, that it is built or that it is checked into the system and it checks out to see if it's ready for build. You do the integration testing here when you're putting these things together. Ideally, this is an automated regression test. If it passes, then you move to a build and test this particular functionality. If the integration testing fails, everything's kicked back to the people who produced it. And yes, this is used. Places like Amazon, where they, like every day of the year except Prime Days and Black Friday, they do about 3,000 releases, I think it is. On the days that I mentioned, what do you think they do? Oh, come on, take a guess.
CI/CD.
They do that, yeah, but they don't freeze everything. They actually end up doing about twice as many integrations and releases on their very busiest days. So they'll do over 6,000 releases in a single day on their highest volume days.
Wow.
Okay, so this isn't relegated to just a single check-in and build and everything. No, this in the industry can be thousands of times per day.
Harry, would that be like repairing stuff, repairing code?
Well, it can be if you've got a priority of tackling technical debt. Yeah. Then if you've made the enhancements or the changes to the code, goes through the same process.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Okay. And then we've covered this before, but test-driven development, where we have the 3 phases. And when it's in here this many times, it's something that may very likely be on the test. So knowing what test-driven development is, what it's composed of, the red phase, writing the tests first. I mean, you start up here. Write a test, confirm that it fails, that the existing software or the existing product does not pass that test. Okay. So you're working on the enhancement, you write just enough code to pass that test. Okay. You verify that it does. And then you can refactor that code to make it more compatible with existing code or to adhere to standards or whatever you need to do, to beef it up, put more fault handling in it, whatever it takes. Okay, and you just keep doing that. If there are going to be like 10 tests for a feature, you run through this 10 times. You don't just lump everything together and see that something fails. With this type of development, you do it single thread. Remember, we don't want things backing up. We want the flow to be as fast as possible. And to do that, you handle one feature at a time. Do the test and one feature and one test at a time. So you do a test, confirm that it fails, write enough code for it to pass, fix up the code, and then write another test. Okay. You don't write all the tests at once. All right. Any questions on things tonight? Has everyone looked at starting an application? An application to take the test, I mean. Has anybody? Raise your hand if you have. If you've started putting together your experience, taking a look at the application. All right, we've got at least one person, which is great. Okay. If I can offer a suggestion, do it as soon as you can. Get it off your plate. Okay. You've got there's a lot of time afterwards that you can take test. Okay, but you have to be authorized to take it. And when you're studying everything, you know, the entire, 21 hours worth here, the entire book, makes it a little bit more difficult to get that application filled out. So if you could just jot down some of your experience and bring it to the next next workshop. If we have time, we can go over that. And if you have any questions about experience, we can talk about that. Okay. But if you plan to sit for the test, get that application started. And also go over, do the questions at the ends of chapter 1 and chapter 2. This is the time to start. Okay. Any questions whatsoever? Yes, Leslie.
I actually meant to raise my hand when you asked if anyone had looked at the application, but I realized
Okay.
it didn't go all the way up, so it was a delayed. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. That's no problem whatsoever. Just glad to see that there's more than one person who's been doing that. Mohammed, you had a question?
Yeah, when you were talking about measurement, it's not like we're measuring any individual performer, right? We're focusing on the team measurement.
Absolutely. Right? It is definitely the results of the team.
Like even a burn up, burn down, velocity, just to show how productive has a team been, not one specific individual over another.
Absolutely. Okay. No, everything, remember, it is the team that is responsible for producing the value. It's the team that either succeeds or fails. But it's the team itself. It's not individuals.
Right. And you did cover the Fibonacci very lightly, so I'm assuming it's not going to be more detailed than that in the test.
No.
Just wondering, like, in the Fibonacci model, did you say relative estimating 1 point equal to a day, 8 hours, 4 hours? So any suggestions for the test or for your life?
It's your baseline. Okay, for an iteration, say, take your smallest story and say maybe that's 1 point. And then base the the size of every other story, comparing it to your baseline story. Now, if your baseline story takes half a day, that's fine. If it takes 2 days, that's fine. You're just doing relative estimating. You don't want to, cram something in there. Like it has to be a 1-day story. And you can do that to bootstrap. Okay, your first time through, find one that'll take a day. And that a day means you do all of your prep work for it. You do your design, your coding, your testing, and delivering all in 1 day. Okay, and then base the size of subsequent stories on that.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And then once you get once you've gone through a number of iterations or a number of increments, you're going to get a handle on how much can be produced by the team in a time box. Okay. And as I said, I mean, if your smallest story is going to take you 2 days, that's fine. You know, that's still a 1-point story.
Right. The point is like you don't want to get to nitty gritty, like track the developers by hours. That's gonna be a nightmare for you, and it's gonna be a nightmare for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Now leadership, managers may ask, may try to equate, job size to hours. No, we're talking story points, the number of story points that we can produce in an increment or in a time box. And it's going to vary. I mean, if 2 different teams are given the same features to develop, for example, in a program increment, the job sizes may be very low in one team and maybe very high in another team based on their, what experience they have, if they're working on a technology for the first time, if they're using certain tools for the first time. It's going to take longer for a new team to be able to do something that an experienced team can do in a very short period of time. Okay, so that's why you don't want to really be comparing team to team, because a 1-point story for an experienced team may be a 5-point story for a new team.
Right, and the nature of work can differ also. So
yeah,
on the prioritization, I know it's super important, but the product owner community, if they're not very, very well versed in Agile, so they may have their own thoughts, may have their own process. So how effective, how do you suggest we should introduce like in a Moscow monopoly and then dot voting and all those things? Or what are the most effective one for the newcomers, or with thoughts, suggestions?
If you can, I'd always use WSGIF.
WSGIF, okay.
But I mean, if you quantify anything, if you can quantify the cost of delay, that is second most accurate.
Right. I've seen a WSGIF being used heavily in safe, but it doesn't have to be safe. It could be
right. It can be anything.
Any environment. Okay.
Yep. Safe just put together a whole bunch of things that they found to be the best practices from a number of places and put that together in a framework. Okay. So anything that is in safe can be used outside of it too. There's no miracle there. With safe, what you do is you establish communication lines, you establish responsibilities. Okay? And that's what it boils down to.
Right. Totally agree. Yep. Do you recommend to have a WIP limit? I mean, I know it's important to have, say, one column, one process doesn't get clogged over, and then doesn't become a flow barrier for the previous one.
Yep.
How do you determine like what should be? Is it based on the team capacity, maturity? Should it be 2 or 5 or?
It depends on how many people are working on it too.
Right.
And if you've got 5 people working on development alone, then your WIP limit may be 5. If they're handing off to one person who's doing some more testing, their WIP limit of 5 is going to, your one tester is going to be a bottleneck.
Right. I mean, these days you have less and less testers. Developers are being asked to test as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in a Scrum team or a development team, what a person does is what helps the team the most. If you need to test, you test. If you need to develop, you develop. And you base your WIP limits on maximizing the flow through the entire system. That's what you really want to do.
Yep. Thank you so much. Makes sense.
Sure. Any other questions? You want 11 and a half minutes back, don't you? Okay, we can do that. So I'm going to stop the recording and wish everybody a good evening then.
Thanks a bunch, Harry. You too.
Yep. Thank you. Have a good
Thanks.
night.